Welcome to Grounded with John Tester and Maritza Giorgio. Hey, Senator, happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, well, it's more important that my wife gets Happy Mother's Day, but
That's
that's
right.
good. Good it's on a Sunday because I'm going to be gone tomorrow. But this is good. It's good to get a little work done on the day of rest.
That's right. I know. And it's not an A month, so you're off the tractor.
Well, kind of. Yeah. Well, hoping the week comes up. It's starting to come up, so we're in great hopes. And it's supposed to rain middle of the end of this week. We almost got a rain yesterday, almost because it went south of us, but it's good. No, look, things are fine on the farm.
We have so much to talk about today
Yeah.
on a Sunday. We want to tease our guests, though. Do you want to tease our guests for today?
Well, yeah, Secretary Glickman is going to be on today, and we're going to get to talk probably a little agriculture, maybe talk a little trade, maybe talk some tariffs. Uh, he's got some he's got some thoughts on that, and we'll share those thoughts with you guys and ask him a bunch of questions and see if we can stump the secretary.
You are going to be shocked, but I have so many questions.
I I am not shocked. What do you mean? I mean, usually I get done with my questions and I just sit back and relax. All right,
Have a beer, it's fine.
when's she gonna wind down, That's good.
Honestly, everybody's been asking that for years. When is she gonna wind down? It's time. It's time.
Oh,
All right.
by the way, not happy Mother's Day to you too. I mean, this is a big day for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just showed you my dog is 5 today. It's her birthday. So we took her for a little hike and I actually carried her for most of the time. But it's a good Mother's Day. I might hang some wallpaper later, get real crazy. All right, let's dig into some headlines. How about just a full goodie bag that we could pick from today? But let's start with White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller telling reporters that they are actively looking into suspending habeas corpus. So if your Latin legal jargon is a little bit rusty, that is the fundamental right that allows somebody who is detained to challenge the legality of their detention. So let's say John Tester is accused of being here in the country illegally and somebody says he would have no avenue to prove that's not true. Now, Miller said the Constitution clearly allows suspending habeas corpus in a time of invasion. This has only been done 4 times in our nation's history. The last time was in 1941, right after Pearl Harbor. We saw Senator John Barrasso this morning on Meet the Press, literally dodging this question of if he would support this if it gets to Congress. So, what do you think?
Well, I mean, this is about the innocent until proven guilty. This is about making sure people have their due process in the courts. This is a direct result of what President Trump said last week on Meet the Press when he said he didn't know if he was going to follow the Constitution. But what makes this even more interesting is they're talking about an invasion when all the talking points coming out of the White House is that they've stopped people coming across the border. And I'm good. I mean, that's a good thing, and they should be proud of that. But it's not an invasion if people aren't coming across the border. And I would just say that they were far different times after the attacking of Pearl Harbor. And the Civil War was another time they suspended habeas corpus, which was the most difficult time in this country's history. And so, I mean, you can either do it the way the forefathers are intended, or you can try to look for loopholes and circumvent the Constitution, which is what I think they're trying to do here. And I don't think it's right. I think, look, what they said, what the president said when he was running for office is it's just he was going to find the people who were here illegally that committed crimes and he was going to kick them out. There's been, as you've already pointed out, plane loads of people who have had no due process. The fellow from Maryland,
Mhm.
who we talked to Van Hollen about here a few weeks ago, um, was deemed by the courts not to be sent out of the country because his life was in danger in El Salvador. But nonetheless, none of that seems to count. If somebody accuses you in the government of being a criminal, then you're automatically a criminal without any due process. And that's why the suspension of habeas corpus is so bad, because anybody could be accused,
Right.
anybody.
It's
And
witch trials all over again.
That's right. And so now I know you're going to get into what happened with the mayor of Newark here, probably put in some of the Congress people, but the truth is that uh, there needs to be facts behind arrests. And if there are not, then you should be able to go to the court and maintain your innocence. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, it's scary to think about that and who could just accuse anybody of anything. And we are seeing now videos playing out in communities across the country, just people pushing back against ICE officers arresting people, detaining people. But it's not just happening in neighborhoods, it's also involving lawmakers. Like you just said, authorities arrested Newark's mayor on Friday during a protest outside of an ICE facility in New Jersey. And now a spokesperson for DHS says they may arrest House Democrats who were involved after they say that those Democrats went to the detention facility to conduct oversight. The DHS spokesperson says they have body camera footage of members of Congress assaulting ICE enforcement officers. The lawmakers say they didn't see any violence against officers there. A couple of things come to mind here. I mean, first of all, we saw officers attacked on January 6th, for one. And the second thing is if people are grabbing people off the streets without showing documentation or their badge, what's like what's coming next? As women, as a woman, I'm concerned about women being just grabbed off the streets by people masked saying they're ICE.
Yeah, that's right. And not knowing. So I look at this not only from that perspective, but also from a perspective that if you might remember right out of the chute when the president, right after he got sworn in, he fired 17 inspector generals. Those are eyeballs that Congress has inside these agencies. So those folks aren't there anymore. So for to have the folks from Congress, whether it's the House or the Senate, go out and see what's going on that the administration is doing, that's really best. That's even better than an IG.
And that's
But
within their purview, right? I mean,
that's
they're
right. Absolutely within their purview. It's their job. It's not only within their purview, they need to do that. I mean, it's part of why people elect them. I want to make sure that my elected representatives in Washington, D.C. are ensuring that things are being run right. And so they went to this detention facility and then they're talking about arresting them. Well, once again here, we're doing away with due process. Let's show them the video. Let's see the video. Let's see what went on because the truth is, oversight is one thing, attacking officers is another. And so if it's there, get it out and don't just intimidate people who are doing their job, which is exactly, I complain about the Senate and the House too, the Senate more than the House because that's where I came from. But the truth is that they're doing their job and now they're talking about arresting them. Things are out of control. I mean, totally out of control. And the only way that this is the right thing to do is if they show the body footage of House members, in this case, attacking agents, which, wow, that'd be something I've never seen before. How they seldom attack one another. Verbally, they do a good job, but very, very seldom physically.
Well,
So,
yeah, I think that's a good point. Let's see the video. Let's see it.
yep.
We'll be looking for that for sure. Okay, President Trump abruptly fired the Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden. This is the first African American and first woman to lead the library. Now, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters there were, quote, quite concerning things she had done at the Library of Congress in the pursuit of DEI and putting inappropriate books in the library for children. But the deal is the Library of Congress doesn't lend out books to kids or actually anyone. Maybe you, Senator, maybe you were able to get materials there. They do host talks by children's authors and they played a big prominent role in the National Treasure movie series, but other than that, they don't lend out books.
Yeah, well, it's called the Library of Congress, but it's not like going down to the public library and checking out books and walking home with them and then bring them back in a few days. This is the outfit. This is the agency that keeps track of uh, our history. And quite honestly, I would guess that Caroline Levitt's never been in the Library of Congress to know what the Library of Congress actually is by those statements. And then it goes back to what we talked about previously, what does she do? I mean, concerning things she had done with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, what are they?
Right.
What did you do? You know, and I just you know, once again, this is a continual pattern here. And it just keeps going and going and going on, and say one thing, do another, based decisions based on false information. And it's happening far more than it's not. And you know, the whole thing, you can go back to the Doge thing with Elon Musk going in, firing people right and left, having no idea what the hell they're doing. Now you got agencies, some of these agencies are hollowed out, due to be hollowed out even more, and nobody's there making decisions because all their decision makers that were any good left or were shown the door. And now we're going to take somebody who is the head of the Library of Congress, which is an important position to have, and we're going to get rid of her. Um, you know, for whatever reason, but they're certainly not very damn specific. I'll say that.
That is one of my favorite places to go in DC too.
It's a marvelous place. It's
It's just
incredible.
okay. Our last headline for today: ABC News reporting that the royal family of Qatar is going to gift President Trump a super luxury Boeing jumbo jet. They're calling this a flying palace. It's to be used as the new Air Force One right before he leaves office. And then the ownership will transfer to the Trump Presidential Library Foundation. It's raising questions, though, about if this is a legal gift because it's, a very big gift. Sources say Trump lawyers have already concluded it is legal, but at the end of the day, Senator, who's going to do anything about it if it's not?
Well, well, I mean, you know, the courts should, but we'll find out. But I mean, look, we've got campaign finance laws in this country that are pretty loose. But one of the things that is still pretty firm is you can't have outside governments or outside foreign companies try to influence our government. So Qatar's, you know, they're going to give this gift, this 747, which I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars that airplane costs, but you know, you don't get anything for free. Something is going to come out of that, and it's not good, and it's a damn bad look to boot. Taking a jumbo jet as a gift from a foreign country that, quite frankly, sometimes is on our side and sometimes they're not. So it's a huge problem, and it smacks of corruption, quite frankly, and shouldn't be allowed at all. And I will tell you that if President Trump uh, was a person who understood that corruption and understood, you know, that you've got to be honest, would never, ever, ever accept this jet from the get-go.
We have so many more we could talk about, including the state of Oklahoma putting into their public instruction curriculum the big lie and discrepancies with the 2020 election. But we will move on because we have a wonderful guest we'd like to introduce you to today, and that is former Secretary of Agriculture Dan Glickman. Prior to that, he was a congressman from Kansas. He was the last Democrat to hold that seat, actually, and he was the designated survivor during President Clinton's State of the Union address, which I have so many questions about. I could do a whole episode just on that, but we want to welcome you, Secretary Glickman.
Well, it's great to be with you, and especially with John Tester, who I always thought was one of my heroes. You know, he, without being obsequious, because I'm already on your show, so you don't have to get me to say anything to be on it as well. But John Tester was the kind of public official that the founding fathers had in mind. You know, that wouldn't take an airplane from the government of anybody to fly anywhere. So anyway, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, it's good to have you here, Dan, from the great state of Kansas and former Secretary of Ag, which we all know is the most important secretarial position of all of them because it deals with food and farmers and can't get any better than that. And I also would say that my neighbor here in Choteau County is an acquaintance of yours and worked in the Department of Ag, and I know has worked with you, a guy named Bruce Nelson.
Oh yeah, I hear from Bruce. I hear from Bruce a lot. We're pen pals, so
yeah,
that's great.
He's a good man and a good Choteau County boy, you know. So it's good. It's
You
good.
have a lot of messages from Montana because I'm going to say hello from the Williams family also, Pat and Carol.
They're
Yeah.
also very good friends, both of them, great public servants. Pat was also, Pat and Carol both were great public servants, but Pat was especially a decent and thoughtful member of Congress.
So let's get after it. Look, you've been pretty outspoken on the op-ed stuff on tariffs. You've been pretty straightforward. Look, the folks who watch this podcast who know me know that in my real life I'm a farmer, and every time there's been a trade war, agriculture usually ends up on the short end of the stick. Just kind of give me your perspective, or give our listeners and viewers your perspective on these tariffs. If there's anything good about them, and if there's stuff that's bad about them, what is it? So just kind of rock and roll.
It's a great question, and I've written a fair amount about this. I think the first question that bothers me is process, John. Tariffs were, I always thought, were in the ambit of the legislative branch of government.
Absolutely
And,
correct.
and so for a president to unilaterally impose big tariffs, across the board tariffs, affecting everything tariffs, not just one item that we may have a problem with, so to speak, is really concerning to me. But this administration has seemed to have gotten away from constitutional restrictions and doing the kinds of things. And so anyway, the process wise, it really bothers me. Okay, that's the one thing. But it's symbolic of a lot of other process things that are happening in our government, where the president is usurping power that belongs to the legislative branch of government. I know you agree with that, and you can speak to that more than I could. The other thing is that there probably are some items where the United States has not as aggressively fought for in terms of trade equity and trade fairness. So I'm not going to tell you that we want absolute free trade, no restrictions, and that doesn't work. We have certain advantages. Other countries have other advantages. But I think the thing that bothers me most about these tariffs is that it comes from the theory that everything we rely on the rest of the world is bad, and we have to produce everything here domestically. And let's take a couple of things, okay? Not necessarily what's grown in our part of the country, but fresh produce, particularly tropical fruits, okay, avocados, oranges, tangerines. I mean, a lot of this stuff has to be imported. It's we don't have the climate to grow it. We're encouraging people to eat more of these things because of our diet as well. And so, we kind of we slapped Mexico with these tariffs, and maybe in part they deserve some of those increased restrictions, but not completely. And it's going to impact the American diet rather significantly, just as a side issue. The same thing is true with Canada. Canada is a great trading partner of the United States, and we've always had some issues with Canada, with grains, with potatoes, with dairy. There's like I'm sure you being on the border there, you had to deal with these all the time. But Canada is also a great ally and trading partner of the United States. I mean, and with respect to lumber, with respect to steel, with respect to energy, and so what's happened is that we've gone across the world and we've just put these tariffs across the board, and it's going to hurt us much more than it's going to help us, and it's not done in a way that is not done thoughtfully at all. And of course, what's happened is that the president's backtracked from a lot of these tariffs because they don't make a lot of sense. And in agriculture, I mean, we have to export about 30 to 40% of our production because the rest of the world needs our production. And the president made this comment in the State of the Union speech, or one of his speeches, where he says our farmers will now be able to produce for the local audience, so to speak. And it was like it showed a lack of understanding that so much of our product has to be exported into the global marketplace. It just was didn't make a lot of sense. And so we're getting hurt now, particularly with respect to exports to China, soybeans. The Brazilians have picked that up. I mean, we have the global marketplace. And so if we don't sell, somebody else will sell, then it will affect our domestic producers. So I'm not saying that the tariff is a cut and dried issue. I'm saying the way they have done it is to make mockery of certainly our processes and our Constitution.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree with you more, Dan. I mean, I think that opening up China to fair trade practices is not a bad thing, but to slap tariffs on everybody in the world, to push our allies away from the very beginning of this administration, to push Canada away and call them 51st state, to take Mexico and try to marginalize them, plus all our European trade partners and everybody else. It doesn't make any sense, because I think you believe, as I think many people do, that targeted tariffs actually can be a functioning thing that actually can work. But when you do across the board stuff, it just has a very, very, very low chance of
And
coming.
and also these like we slapped 145% tariffs on China. Well, might as well have slapped 1,000% tariff on China. You know, and look, the Chinese don't make life easy for us in a lot of ways with respect to intellectual property theft, and you know, but at the same time, they and us are the largest markets in the world. So we gotta do our best to try to work this out, because sometimes these economic restrictions can lead to geopolitical restrictions and then conflicts, and that's not worth doing. So, you know, John, you can speak to this more than I can, John, but the hope is that Congress and the private sector, American business community, and the American philanthropic and humanitarian communities can lift their voices up and find the political will to say no to the president, to tackle the president, what he's doing. And you know, it's like these branches of government are supposed to be equal. The Article 1 branch, which is the Congress, and by the way, it's the Article 1 branch, not the Article 3 branch. I mean, it's the branch that I think Congress felt was closest to the people. It's supposed to be equal to the Article 2 branch and the Article 3 branch, and it doesn't feel that way anymore.
Not at all. Not at all. They've ceded all their power to the executive branch. Maritza, your turn.
Well, which thread am I going to pull here? Let's start with that. Like, if they did something today, if tariffs, let's say, went back to zero today for some of these countries, I'm seeing a lot of economists say we are still in trouble. We're still going to have higher prices. We're still going to have shortages because of the policies that have been in place for, you know, the last few months, I guess now. And so I'm guessing, like, what's the best, or I'm asking you, what's the best case scenario here for us to recover from this as quickly as possible?
Well, you know, first of all, as you pointed out, it's created disruptions all over the world, and particularly if you're a small business person, you don't have the wherewithal to cope with the not knowing tomorrow what the tariff is going to be. And tariff is basically a tax, so not knowing tomorrow how it's going to impact your business. And so the best scenario that can happen, rather than we can complain about the best we can, is for Congress to assert itself. And it's tough because the Republicans, I'm not the most overly partisan guy in the world. I know John isn't either, but where are the Republicans when it comes to a government that's supposed to respect the institutions of government, the constitutional principles? And so that's one thing. You know, the president's out making his deals now. He said we're going to find deals that we can make with countries all over the world. We've had one potential deal with the UK, which may look okay because there are some agricultural products in there that they're going to open their markets more to. But right now, all we can do is keep the pressure on. There's litigation on this already in the courts, you know, in terms of what is the power of the White House to unilaterally impose tariffs. And, you know, if the public sees that they're getting hurt on this, I mean, if their prices are going up, or the shelves are empty, or they can't get what they need, or the supply chains aren't working in the commercial sector, and prices go up, then the public's going to speak very loudly. And the one kind of encouraging thing I hear periodically is this president is responsive to that. We'll see if he is, but at least that's the ultimate factor to determine whether we can turn this thing around or not.
There is a lot of spin, though. I mean, you know, we keep hearing about this deal, and our friend Justin Wolfers, who we had on a few weeks ago, who's nicknamed Fed Lasso, he said it's time to stop calling these deals because A, they are talking about a baseline of 10% tariffs across the board, and also
Right.
we already had low tariffs from the UK, and this is still higher than what we had. So what are your thoughts on that? Should we be calling this a deal?
Yeah, look, he imposed these across the board, and And in addition to that, then he imposed very high tariffs on, just about everybody else over and above that. So I think he felt that the leverage of his bullying the rest of the world would allow them more access to open, their markets to our products. But in many cases, we have pretty good access into the other countries' markets. I'm not saying it can't be improved, but you take various industries. So one industry is agriculture, relies on exports and global global economic relationships. I mean, it's just without it, our agriculture will be a shell of itself if we don't have that reliance. There's other industries the same way. Aviation the same way. Aviation relies on exports, and the entertainment industry relies on exports. High tech relies on exports for Americans to produce jobs and everything else. So I think the public is beginning to get it, and the politics is still a ways off. What I'm looking forward to seeing is the Republicans in Congress beginning to recognize this and pushing back. There are a few that are pushing back, but still it's pretty small.
You're right, and I think that if people start putting pressure on their senators and their House members, then those House members and Senate members will be more inclined to put pressure on the president, and that's really, since Congress has totally push their responsibility onto the executive branch when it comes to tariffs, maybe they'll start grabbing some of that back. Because as you've already pointed out, under the Constitution, tariffs should be done by the Article 1 folks, not the Article 2 folks, the legislative branch, not the executive branch.
And it's hard. These are hard things to work on. And we worked on trade agreements. We've worked on them for years and years and years, and it's like, yeah, it would be nice if the president probably like, God, I'd like the powers of Xi in China, or the powers of a dictator, and I'd like to be able to snap my fingers and get things done. And that Congress is a nuisance. It's an annoyance. We don't want to have to deal with them. Well, unfortunately, in our system of separation of powers, you do. And so I agree with you. I'm beginning to sense, John, that there are more and more people on the Republican side of the aisle who understand this issue and who agree. There's a fear factor out there about taking on the president. I don't know. They're scared of him. I'm not sure if they believe that maybe they'll lose their jobs because if they don't support the president. And you and I know that, yeah, these are great jobs in the world, but I lost my last election to Congress in 1994. I mean, it's not great to lose, but it's also not the end of the world either when you do things the right way. There are other things in life as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I will tell you that with Congress being AWOL, and I mean they're AWOL. I mean, show me what they're doing that makes a difference on anything, because I haven't seen it in the last 4 months. Trump's pretty much got the way he wants, because he does anything he wants. He ships people out of this country without due process. He puts tariffs on. He does it all. I mean, it does it all. And if he doesn't like this tax bill that they're working on, they're not going to do this tax bill. You know what I mean? So it's they just really have ceded all their power to the president.
And in some sense, it is Trump's fault, but in some sense, it's not Trump's fault. He's pushing as far as he can. And if nobody resists him,
that's right.
Then life goes his way. Then and that's shameful. I mean, and I know so many members of Congress have concerns about this stuff. But I've talked to a lot of them privately, and you're right, and we'll work as hard. There's this issue about when they shut down this agency, U.S. Agency for International Development, and so we're seeing all sorts of assistance that we provided to the rest of the world for hunger, for humanitarian assistance, for health assistance, and there's been some pushback in that area, and so it makes a difference when there's pushback. They don't need to be afraid. I think the big thing is trying to tell them, get a grip, guys. This is why the country was set up the way it was, so that you would get a grip. You could push back. There's really nothing he can do. Yeah, maybe he can make it harder on your base when you have your elections, but that's the way it is. Don't be afraid of that.
That's exactly right. And besides that, why'd you run for office? Did you run for office to be a rubber stamp, or did you run for office to hold people accountable, as the Constitution says, with the checks and balances? I mean, really, when you go to bed at night and you're laying in bed, are you going to say to yourself, yeah, I was on the wrong side of history here, but it felt good while I did it, instead of getting out there and fighting like hell for your constituents and making sure things are right. And these tariffs are a prime example of that, by the way, with a lot of other stuff that I know the people I served with know that this doesn't pass the smell test, but yet they refuse to say anything because I
Yeah,
think you're afraid. Yep.
absolutely.
Yep.
So, Secretary, you were also, let's continue this talk about tariffs a little bit. You were also the chairman and CEO of the Motion Picture Association of America. I want to ask you about this idea of imposing a 100% tariff on movies made outside of the US. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel joked that The White Lotus is going to be set at a Hampton Inn next, but in all seriousness, if this becomes reality, then what?
Well, first of all, it's a ridiculous idea. Okay, but let's start it. The fact of the matter is, movies, television shows, these are global industries. So a lot of these, we in our country it's a big export item, giant export item. Movies are a giant export item. Okay, so in some sense, there's a lot of parallels with agriculture. It's a giant export item, and a movie is made with all sorts of background actors, finance, everything else. So these are global type events. And so if we're going to say that we're going to put a big tariff on any movie that's made overseas, okay, so what does that ultimately mean? Well, that probably means that some of these countries won't buy our movies in the first place, and we have to sell about 35-40% of our product overseas, movies, television shows. So again, you're cutting your nose off to spite your face, and one foot on the brake and one foot on the accelerator. The other thing is states now. I don't know about Montana, but a lot of states are providing now new tax incentives for producing movies there. New York State is one, Georgia, not just California.
We are too. We are too.
Okay, so that's another way to get at this. I'm not saying that maybe there are some incentives that the film and television industry needs, but we don't need to slap a tariff on any movie. And plus the fact is, then you have movies, you take movies like, I'm just going to say this as an example, like the Mission Impossible movies. Okay, so the movies are shot all over the world, okay, because they're shot on location. American actors, foreign actors, some American investment, foreign investment, and American distribution film companies are the ones that are selling all these world. These are global companies. So it just doesn't make any sense. Now, maybe he's trying to change the content of what's going into these movies. I'm not sure what his goals are, but it is kind of a funny thing. And I saw the Jimmy Kimmel quote about producing the movies at a Hampton Inn and someplace and wherever, So I don't think this is probably going to go. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's scary. It's scary, that you think that everything's going to be produced in the United States of America. No, that's not going to happen. We have a global world. We have customers buying our product overseas. Yes, sometimes we get taken advantage of. The Chinese are probably some of the worst because they tend to steal intellectual property, and it's been a real challenge with them, over the world. But there's no massive conspiracy on American entertainment.
Yeah, I often think that instead of calling tariffs, we ought to be calling them taxes, because
That's what they are. They're taxes.
They're
taxes.
taxing,
Yeah.
taxing the motion picture industry, or they're taxing the American farmer, or they're taxing, people who are in manufacturing, whatever it might be. But that's the problem.
And it's like, I was thinking to myself, okay, the James Bond franchise is one of the biggest movie franchises of all time. It's British. It's not. I mean, it's like, it's the way it is. I mean, James Bond is probably not going to be a good old Southern boy, who's trying to change the world. I mean, people love, it's like, so you got to take advantage of the stuff that, people buy that content and produce it because it's good and it sells and it makes people happy, consumers happy. So the American consumer ultimately may decide a lot of these questions if they get really upset.
Yeah, I think you're right, Dan. Except the tariff stuff takes a while to kick in. Now, let me give you an example. Soybean prices have dropped off, but wheat and corn are holding reasonably well. I mean, I was actually surprised when I checked the markets, and they're not tanking, and they'll start tanking when those markets go away, and when they're gone.
That's an excellent point. And the agriculture markets are global in nature, so that at least initially, let's say if one market dries up, then it's filled by another market, and these products are fungible. So wheat is wheat and corn is corn, and so it doesn't necessarily have an immediate effect. But some things it does. Input costs, fertilizer costs,
Absolutely.
those things have a big impact on the front end that farmers have to face. And I go back to the consumers as well. We have to realize that we're, the way we tried to work this to basically shut off Mexico from selling their products in the United States is not necessary. When you go to the grocery store, you want to find these products year round, and we just don't grow a lot of them year round. So that's why some of these imports are so necessary.
Yeah, right on.
All right, I have a few more questions kind of unrelated to tariffs, but related to your background and expertise, if that's okay. You're a senior fellow at the Bipartisan Policy Center, and I actually am on the board of the Marina Mike Mansfield Center, and we try to foster bipartisanship and diplomacy. And I'm wondering if you find it hard to kind of focus on bipartisan solutions right now with so much happening and so much focus on lawmakers that are just kind of placating to the president, placating to what he wants without actually working across the aisle.
No, and of course Mike Mansfield was the great senators of all time, and really I've never forget. He was the one who was on Meet the Press, and he answered more questions, I think, during 30 minutes than anybody ever in their history, because he would say yes, no,
Yep.
and
Nope.
hey,
Yeah.
nope, yes, nope. I thought to myself, how great. John Tester's a little bit like that too, so look, there are still a fair number of things that are done bipartisan, more smaller things, but important piece of legislation. You'll see Democrats and Republicans, working together on things. But by and large, we have a much more toxic political environment than we've had in a very long time. It doesn't help when the president's rhetoric is just totally toxic all the time. And it doesn't help when the way we finance our campaigns is often encouraging bitterness and acrimony and ads, and politics is the art of who can be tougher and meaner, and that's clearly not the nature of our media. Doesn't encourage people to try to work together a bit. So a lot of these are really big problems, far beyond just the nature of the political process itself. And John Tester is probably a perfect example of this, because John was a thoughtful, bipartisan guy, worked across the aisle on things that he could, and recognized that was the only way to get things. Can't get things done in a partisan world, exclusively partisan. Nothing happens. You got build, and so it's unfortunate, and it's been made worse in recent years by a lot of these other factors I talk about, and the Trump administration has made it even worse than before. We just got to continue to work on this problem. We can't not try to solve it. And even though it's tough, we got to make it so the public cares about bipartisanship and getting things done. And right now, the public's not real keen about politics in general.
Yeah, I think there's a fatigue there for sure. The other thing, well, I have two more things I wanted to ask you about. John's gonna laugh because this is how I roll every week. But when we talk about the Secretary of Agriculture, the Department of Agriculture, a lot of people think farming, right? We talked about that, but I think they forget that the Forest Service falls under that, and we have.
By the way, that's the biggest part of the Department of Agriculture employees is the Forest Service.
Right. So not only we have concerns about the DOGE cuts within the U.S. Forest Service and what that's going to mean for things like wildfire season, but also USDA and some of these food regulations that are being rolled back. So I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about that and what concerns you and what gives you hope in those arenas.
Well, this is a really big department that does a lot of things. And the largest spending item in the Department of Agriculture are our federal feeding programs. So it's SNAP or food stamps. It's school feeding, school lunches, school meals. It's WIC, the Women, Infant, Children program. And so right now Congress is considering, if they ever get a farm bill done, how much money to put into these programs: rural development, conservation, other kinds of things, funding the Forest Service, food safety. And, we have, I'm not saying agriculture as it affects people's lives is perfect. But we've got a pretty good system in America in terms of getting food to people, both people who can afford to pay it and hungry people as well. And there are always tweaks that can be made along the way. But as John Tester pointed out at the beginning, USDA is a really important agency in making sure people trust that our food is safe, because if they're safe, they will eat it. And if it's not safe, they won't. And that's going to impact agriculture. And we still have 30 or 40 million Americans who can't buy an adequate diet and these programs are really important to feed hungry people, and plus all the other things that are out there. And you talk about the Forest Service. So, the Forest Service is, I used to call it my Marine Corps, my little Marine Corps, because they really were exceptionally well organized. The Park Service too, but the Forest Service is probably even more so, because they did more in the area of management of timber and conservation, that kind of thing. And it is really important for our country that we have a Forest Service that is morale is high and is adequately funded. Because what's going to happen is we're going to have problems. There are going to be forest fires, there are going to be droughts, there are going to be all sorts of other things. And then we're going to come back in and try to fix the problems after we have kind of decimated some of the programs.
Right.
You led me right into my next question and my last question, and we're going to kind of go back in time a little bit. And I bugged the senator a lot about this when he was in office. But I have to ask you about these feeding programs, specifically military family hunger, because you were a principal author of the 1990 Farm Bill, but also you're on the board of Mazone, a Jewish response to hunger, who I have worked with and reported on so much in investigating military family hunger, and that so many of our junior enlisted service members are not eligible on paper for SNAP benefits, and they can't feed their families. And I've bugged the senator about this many times. What can we do about this? Why isn't there a fix? And it seems like there's always a proposed fix in the next farm bill coming up. Is this on your radar, and do you see a fix for these families? Because I'll never forget sitting at these kitchen tables with mothers crying because they don't know how they're going to put food on the table, and they go wait in line for hours at a drive-through food bank on their base just to get some flour and some dehydrated milk.
Well, I know Senator Tester has been very involved in this issue over the years. I'd say a couple things. Number one is that our federal feeding programs don't take care of military families as well as they should. That too many military families qualify for benefits like SNAP, food stamps, and other benefits as well. And so it really is disgraceful that continues to happen. At the same time, believe it or not, the United States of America has the most advanced federal feeding program in the world. A lot of countries will just give direct checks and commodities to people. And that, by the way, that's still a good thing. Our food banks are really important as a supplemental place. And a lot of the military families get their extra food from food banks, which are not really federal programs, although they get some commodities from federal programs. And by the way, the Trump administration wants to shut some of those programs off, the commodities that go to the federal programs. But we also have another problem with the military, and that is that in terms of access to nutritious food, because if you don't have enough resources for the food that you buy, then you're going to have people who are not getting what I call a balanced, well-balanced, complete nutritious meal as well. So we'll see what happens in this farm bill. I don't know, John, what you think, whether you're encouraged or not, whether we're even going to get another farm bill this year. It just seems like they're stuck and they can't get it past something that this shouldn't be rocket science to get a farm bill passed to deal with the problems that you're talking about and everything else. But it just doesn't seem to be getting done.
I agree with you 100%. I think that it's entirely doable. I thought it was doable last Congress. I think you gotta, as you well know, Dan, you just gotta get the right people in the room. You get the right people in the room, you can get anything done, but it's gotta be done in a bipartisan way. And you've gotta have support of the executive branch. You can't have the president threatening to veto something that comes out, for example, that feeds people. Because it's a pretty bad look for the United States of America to have a bunch of hungry people that are starving to death.
And not only in the United States, so I recall that George W. Bush, president, was probably will be known in history as the man who saved millions of lives, he and his administration globally,
Yes.
through PEPFAR, through malaria, through AIDS, and through hunger kind of efforts. And you know, and so you know, I worked for President Clinton, and he knew agriculture very well, and by and large, we were constructive forces in that field. And right now, you know, I don't. This is nothing personal because I don't know the new secretary. She makes a nice impression on TV. I'm not exactly sure that, you know, they all have to follow orders. It looks like to me, you know, not just her, but everybody in the administration. And so it's just tough times to deal with a lot of these issues, and a lot of the leadership does come from the top. And if it's not there, it's just not going to happen. And of course, they're dealing now with a reconciliation bill and a tax bill and appropriations bills, and the federal budget deficit is worse than ever. So they've got all sorts of challenges that they have to deal with. But let's just hope that their people are as humane as possible to trying to work these things out in a bipartisan way.
Absolutely. And I think there's good people, if they're allowed to sit down and do it, set the politics aside, they can have a farm bill by the end of the week. I honestly believe that. And that was true 6 months ago, it was true a year ago. Just put the politics aside and do what's right. And they could have a farm bill very, very quickly. So.
All right,
just mine.
Secretary, my very last question is just out of pure curiosity. Like, can you tell us what it was like to be the designated survivor? Do you remember that night? What was that like?
Well, I'm not as good looking as Kiefer Sutherland was on when they did the TV show. So, but this was pre 9/11. It was 1997, January of 97. So every State of the Union message, they'd always have the odd person out, and that person would go somewhere else in case the place was bombed or destroyed. And so in my case, I went to New York. They wanted me out of Washington. So I went to New York to visit my daughter who lived in New York. And so we flew up to Washington. I flew up to New York in a Gulfstream airplane, and we had somebody from military police and the doctor and a few other people with us. So we got to my daughter's apartment, and we walked in. I think everybody thought this was an immigration raid. They were coming in because all these people and so we went upstairs and we listened to President Clinton give his speech. And he talked longer than he should, which he usually did. So the speech was supposed to take 45 minutes. It took about an hour and 45 minutes. After we're done, the Secret Service says, well, Mr. Glickman, the mission terminated. We're going back to Washington. I said, I'll stay here in New York. I'll be with my daughter. And we went out to dinner. And that night there was a big a sleet storm. And so we got out about midnight. After I was the designated survivor. And they didn't have Uber or any of these car services back then, no cabs. And we walked about 13 blocks back in this blinding sleep storm, she and I was just thinking, I told her, I said, you know, your dad was probably the most powerful man on the face of the earth for about an hour, 3 hours ago. And today we can't even get a cab. And it's now done differently. Now they have a much more organized, and after 9/11, it's a much more serious problem. But it was a lot of fun. At least it gives me a good story to tell.
Darn right. Well, thanks for telling your story today. We appreciate you being on very, very much, Dan. Appreciate your service to the country and your continued service to the country.
John, I appreciate it. We miss you. You tell the good folks in Montana, Bruce Nelson and others, that I said hello, and keep up the Mansfield work. That's also really important as well, too. So call me anytime. Thanks a lot. Appreciate being on this podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Man, would you want to be designated survivor? I wouldn't.
I don't know. Have you ever been to a State of the Union speech? I think I'd take designated survivor. I'm telling you.
I watch all of them.
The State of the Union speeches, they're always painful, man. All of them. Every damn one of them I ever went to. In fact, I had a bet with my LD that I was never going to go to another one. He bet me a case of beer. I ended up owing him 6, 8, 10 cases of beer by the time I got out. After my first one, I swore him off, but I could never get out of them.
Yeah,
They're
it's kind
painful.
of important for you to be there, maybe. I mean, they are addressing.
They're painful. I mean, I'm telling you, standing up and sitting down and clapping and not clapping, and you should be clapping and you aren't clapping, and oh my God, what a
Everyone's at, you don't know when the camera's on you. Is that the worst part? Is just the optics, or what made it so painful?
I always forget about that stuff, but but the truth is that it's just painful. The first one I went to, I sat by Mark Pryor, senator out of Arkansas, and he says, I hope these guys behave. And I said, what the hell are you talking about? And he said, yeah, these guys. And I said, who's those guys? And he pointed over to the House. Evidently the House are the ones that get rowdy all the time, but oh, it was the whole outfit. And it's just I don't know. I'd rather be in, this is saying something. I'd rather be in New York walking through the sleet than have to sit in those goddamn.
Oh my God. There's the quote, folks.
There
There's
you
the
go.
quote. Oh man, final thoughts on our conversation.
Well, look, I mean, I think he understands that the tariffs are creating a lot of uncertainty, and that uncertainty is bad for business and it's bad for consumers, and I think that's the problem. I mean, I think everybody has said this that we've talked to on this show and a lot of other folks that there wasn't a lot of thought put in. The blanket tariff stuff has a greater potential of not working than it does working. And I think by the time we start seeing shortages on shelves and markets disappearing, it'll be long, long, long past the time to do something about this. And then the other thing you said that I couldn't agree with more is there's more division today than there's ever been before. And I think you need to only look as far as what's gone on in our campaign system. It
Mhm.
needs to be fixed. And then, President Trump tries to capitalize on that division with even more division, and he does it. We saw it on Meet the Press. We see it nearly every time he speaks. And that division doesn't do anything more than help people who want to try to either stop things from working at all or like the system the way it is, and they don't want to change at all because they're profiting greatly off it. So if you get nothing done and there's a paralysis caused by the division, that's a win for them. So that's kind of where we're at right now. But no, it's a good conversation. It's been around. It's got a lot of life experience. It's got a lot of institutional memory.
Yeah, when I was reading his bio and really digging into it, it's like, oh, I want to ask about that and that and that. I mean, he's been involved in everything. Okay, we have a viewer email. This is from Mark, and he talked about watching the chaos in America right now. And he says, John, being somewhat of an exception, having stayed in the mix with your podcast after leaving office, he's curious if there's a reason why former presidents, former speakers of the House stay out of politics. He's specifically wondering, why former presidents aren't standing up and saying enough. We kind of heard Obama, he finally kind of said something, but he's just wondering, like, is there an unwritten rule that they did their duty and they don't interfere now?
No, there is an unwritten rule. They may have a job or a contract with somebody that prevents them from being perceived partisan, but a lot of them don't. And I think, it's been a couple months that I talked to former Governor Roscoe about this very issue, about, you know, he's a guy that's speaking up, making sure his voice is being heard and doing a very, very good job of it, and I applaud that. But he asked the question, where's all our former presidents out there? Because we got a bunch of them. Some of them are Democrats, some are Republicans, and you got to know that they don't much like what's going on from a procedural process, from a process standpoint on this stuff, as Secretary Glickman said. But they're not standing up, and I don't know. Maybe it's an unwritten vow of honoring the office. I don't know what it is, but I do think that they ought to at least let their opinions be heard, because I would bet you it would be a bipartisan opinion that things like tariffs should be done by Congress, not by the president, that due process should be honored, and that we should follow the Constitution. I bet you every one of the former presidents would be bipartisan in that perspective. And so it would be good if they stood up for sure.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Senator Tester is wearing a black hat today. I can't read it.
You
Is it
know, it's
something?
it's 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 uh it's a steel
Oh,
accept that, and
deal, etc.
yeah, and it's just, I was putting duck foot shovels on my duck foots this weekend, and you take the old shovels, you throw them in a container to haul off for scrap. You pay 20, $30 for the new ones, and you haul off a tote load of scrap and get 20, 30 bucks. So it all works out.
Nice.
You know?
Help me what's a duck foot shovel?
It's a shovel that you put on a tillage tool that I guess they kind of look like a duck foot. They're
Oh,
16, mine are 60. You can buy them any width you want. I put on 16-inch shovels that you till up ground, kill
fill
weeds,
up the
and
ground. Okay.
yeah, and
All right. Well, you made
it's
more money on your steel recycling than we've made on the podcast, so good job.
yeah, things are looking down. That's good.
Well, you're off though tomorrow. That's the reason we're doing this on Sunday, on Mother's Day Sunday, is you are on the road tomorrow. You want to talk to folks about what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I'll just tell you just to tune in to Nicole Wallace on MSNBC. That's the best thing I can tell you. I think her show comes on at 4 p.m. Eastern time, Eastern Daylight Time. So
Okay.
whatever time zone you may be in, you can tune in at the appropriate time.
Okay, that's the tease. I will be tuning in. We want to thank our guest today, Secretary Glickman, for joining us, helping us shed light on some of these issues happening. You can find us on Substack, Blue Sky, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also shoot us an email anytime at groundedpcast@gmail.com. I actually had a few people say they are going to write us fan mail because they want to hear us talk about them.
Wow, that's
I was
somebody's
at a
got
party last night and then
somebody
this
that's had a
happened.
tough life. That's a tough life right there.
That's a tough.
Good. Oh,
We would love it though if you would get in touch with us, like, subscribe our pages, leave a review if you feel so inclined. And thank you so much to our friends at Pearl Jam for letting us use their music, and to all of you, our listeners. We'll chat again soon.
tally ho.